Yes, I grew up in Brighton Beach, and my parents were immigrants from Ukraine, Russia, Poland, however you want to call it, depending on who took it over at what time. So I'm going to read just a few from this book, just a spattering, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about publishing, and then I'll read from my other book. Okay, this is called First Love. In 6th grade English, Mrs. Kaminsky ruled. I loved a boy 3 seats away who failed to notice me. He was pale from having had scarlet fever, though I imagined him a brooding poet. We lived near the ocean and wrote odes to Poseidon, god of the sea. My first love moved on from PS 215. He grew up to have his voice and image on countless TV screens until he was shunned for luring women into hotel room closets and biting their bare backs. Not the bard whom I imagined, yet he still ignored me at our chance encounter in the checkout line at LaGuardia Airport. I stared at his back, wondering. So this is my first love. You can guess who that was. It was someone who became a famous person and then had issues. Oh, she's looking and saying who she thinks it is. All right, I'm not going to tell you.
Yes.
Marv Alpert.
Oh, my
Yeah. Marv Alpert. He was a newscaster and got into scandals later on in life. He was in my class. I was in love with him when I was in 6th grade.
What school?
You dodged a bullet.
And I met him at LaGuardia Airport, and I just wanted to talk to him, but he was so scared that, I was trying to say something that he didn't even want to talk to me. I said, we were in Mrs. Lipinski's class, don't you remember me? All right, this one is called Reverence. My father hid $20 bills in an Oxidol box under the kitchen sink, though we revered the Lincoln Savings Bank. I whispered in the marble-lined interior, President Lincoln carved into the facade. Our next most sacred institution was Mrs. Stoll's Knishes, catty corner to the bank, worshipped for the potato pocketed in crisp layers of dough. My father brought home a bulging paper bag, no mention of his oldest sister sentenced to the gulag, soup made of potato peels for her meal, or his other sister and her 2 children forced onto a freight train heading to the death camps. I tore open the filled brown bag. He favored the kasha, and I the slightly sweet cherry cheeks. So that's my poem called Reverence. Let's see, what else did I want to read from here? The BMT line. I don't know how many people know the BMT line. I fled on the BMT line, a long braid down my back, leather sandals on my feet, to a narrow railroad flat, poetry and La Dulce Vita on my mind. My mother came to visit, tried to lure me back with a package of meat ground twice. I did not budge until a guy with hazel eyes turned up. He knew all the capitals of Africa, and on our first date listened intently to Thelonious Monk. 3 months later, I proposed, and he said yes. We rode back over the Brooklyn Bridge to where the sea air smelled like fish, and the Wonder Wheel lit up the boardwalk, the cars sliding back and forth over the cadence foam of the Atlantic. And here's one in that same vein called The Wedding Tale. The groom glanced down at his shoes, imagining the glass beneath his foot, the fragility of human relationships. The rabbi had been enlisted as he fed pigeons outside his window. The wedding canopy, a prayer shawl strung over 4 thin poles. Mother was radiant in aqua organza with white corsage. The guests assembled, her only cousin and his family, traveling all the way from Buenos Aires. The rabbi began his Hebrew chanting, eyes closed, lost in Babylonian exile. It was a while before I heard Aaron, my father's name, followed by a muddle of Hebrew prayers. I was being married to my father. I turned to the groom. He lifted my bridal veil, his lips brushing my ear, and whispered, "Screw Freud." The guests shouted Mazel Tov and threw handfuls of tiny candles at us, tiny candies at us. So that's my wedding tale. It just so happened that my parents were not religious at all. They were immigrants, and for the holidays, instead of going to shul, they walked on the boardwalk. They got dressed up and they walked on the boardwalk for all the different Jewish holidays. But when we got married, we went to a Orthodox synagogue, and my parents, who had no real experience with rabbis or synagogues at that time, there was a rabbi, we lived on Brighton 12th Street, and there was a rabbi an older man who used to feed the pigeons, and they got him to be the rabbi. And that's that experience. He was slightly demented, and we were, sorry, Rabbi, but this was a real experience that we had. But we did get married, and it was legitimate. That was and it did get to be legitimate. And I'll just read one more from this book, okay? And this one, since we're in a synagogue, this is something perhaps, I know the rabbi knows this, and I wonder if other people do. Do you know what a lamed vavnik is? Does anybody know?
Yeah.
A lamed vavnik.
Supposedly one of the 36 people whose righteousness keeps the world from being destroyed.
Yes. So it's do you have anything to add to that? What a lamed vavnik?
Hidden saints, yeah.
Yes. So it's one of the 36 righteous people. So I have a poem here called Lamed Vavnik.
And they're hidden.
And they're hidden.
In the story of tradition,
Yes.
people, we don't know who they are.
We don't know who they are. They could be anybody. And yet they are the righteous people in the world. Yeah, and this is a mythology or whatever you want to call it in Jewish religion. Lamed Vavniks. I'd like to know the unnamed 36 people roaming the earth. The designated righteous. It could be the freckled 5th grader who plays the tuba, or the topless blonde at the Texas Go-Go Bar. I want to meet these tzaddiks at a dinner party. Dab my mouth with a napkin and turn to each one. How do you keep it up, I ask. When you enter a bank, do you keep yourself from sliding the ballpoint pen into your pocket? Do you stop to help every beggar on the street? I want to be the 37th Lamed Vavnik. I'll climb mountains and descend into valleys to search for people who are in mourning and require a good deed. I'll spin their grief into gold and render painless their prickly thorns of guilt. So that was my version of Lama Gubnik. And so I'll stop here and
Thank
we
you.
can talk, and then I can tell you about my other book.
So, wonderful. Thank you again, Harry, for coming. It's so wonderful. You're our first poet in this series. The others have been fiction writers and one professor of Jewish literature. And I think, well, I start usually by asking all of the authors that we've had to just react to the opening of this book, Jews and Words, by Amos Oz and Fania Oz Salzberger. But I think for you as a poet, I'm going to start with a slightly different question, and I will ask you to respond to that. One of the things that there's several quite extraordinary things about Jews and poetry. So one which struck me this year, and we actually hear, and some of you were here for Elul, which is the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah, which is traditionally a time of introspection. We had a few nights of what I called an Elul poetry exchange, where some people in the room and some others brought a poem. It was bring a poem and get a poem, basically, and whatever you like, whatever is moving to you right now, bring it and share it, and then someone else will share another poem. And it was really, really lovely. I think. And there was a great diversity of poetry selected, which was beautiful. So the impetus behind that in my mind was, it dawned on me, not for the first time, but I was thinking a lot, I guess, in the lead up to holiday this year, about how, as Jews, when we get together to pray, typically, Jews pray in all kinds of ways, but typically if you get together to pray and you have a siddur in your hand, most of what you are actually doing is reciting poetry together, or singing poetry together, or chanting poetry together. And so, one would think that all Jews are just, poetry lovers. From way back. So I'm curious, and a related idea, which I like to reflect, I guess, on all of this, is that, a related remarkable thing is that, I think as Jews we have a few paradigmatic heroes in the Tanakh. One of them is definitely Yaakov, Jacob. One of them is probably Moshe. But one of them really is David, who is, one of our certainly the most complicated and I think fascinating literary character in the Tanakh. And part of him, and part of how the tradition imagines him, is as a poet. He's this, our hero is this great warrior, lover, poet guy, who of course traditionally wrote the Psalms, even though modern scholars don't think that he did. But nonetheless, that's been part of the David legend for a very long time. So I guess I'm curious to hear you reflect on all of that, either on your experience of Jewish poetry as a synagogue goer, to the extent that you're a synagogue goer, or your sense of yourself as a Jewish poet, sort of in a very long, ancient lineage of Jewish poets.
Well, I have to admit that I'm not religious. So I'm not, even though I've been to Reform synagogues, I didn't grow up religious. So I didn't grow up with a lot of this tradition. In fact, I would say that my father came here and he rejected religion, almost, but very Jewish, culturally very Jewish, but not necessarily schooled in a lot. But the Bible is, of course, full of poetry, whether it's the Old Testament or the New Testament. They're all full of poetry, and I guess that was a way of expressing themselves. And in fact, I think it's in that book that I mentioned David. And of course there's Song of Solomon. So there's plenty of poetry. I don't know if we are particularly, I know the Irish are known for being very lyrical and very musical in their, I don't know if the Jews are necessarily known for being poets. I think we are more known, or I feel that I am a Jewish poet because I've experienced both the light and the dark. And I think for Jews, for example, a sense of humor is very important. And in a lot of my poetry, even though there may be darkness, there's also a sense of humor. And I think that comes from years of suffering, I guess, and the need to see the light as well as the dark. So I see that as a part of our heritage, and that can come out in poetry.
When you're writing poetry, do you think of it as for yourself, as a Jewish endeavor?
No, I think of it as I have an image of something that I think other people might be interested in, and that from that image something grows. And I may end up with something different than what I started with. It's an exploration, but being Jewish is who I am. So my voice is a very Jewish voice. It's a very feminine voice. It's a very Brooklyn voice. It's all the things that I am, including being Jewish.
Do you have either, so, and, you know, do you have, so, you know, when we think about the Tanakh, so the Hebrew Bible, right? I mean, it's an anthology, you know, it's like Northman's anthology of ancient Israelite writings is sort of how I sometimes describe it. And there's a variety of genres in there, as you know, as I think probably everyone in the room knows. There's history, and there's myth, and there's poetry. There's some poetry in the Torah itself, in the 5 books of Moses, like the Song of the Sea, where the people are, you know, the sea parts and the people are crossing through. There's a few poems in the 5 books of Moses. But most of the poetry is in the writings, famously in the Psalms, and also in things like Song of Songs, and in some other places there's sort of poetic forms. Do you have you spent? Tell me about your experience of that literature. You know, the biblical anthology of poetry of it.
I'm really not. That's not my background. But as a matter of fact, in that book, I have referenced the Song of Songs, and I've referenced other things that have to do with King David and the rooftop. These are just images that have occurred to me and that come to me from what I know, but I'm not a scholar as you are, as a rabbi, or a person who's more devout would know more. I'm not that kind of scholar, but I have, like the Lamed Vavnik, I just thought, my goodness, that's such an interesting phenomenon. And I know it for some reason because I've come across it, and it would be something I'd like to write about.
Let me read you something, and I'm going to ask you to react to it. So I've asked all of our writers to react to this, so some people in the room have heard me read this before. It's like a lot of good writing. I think it bears repeating, though on the 5th or 8th time.
Who wrote it? Amos Oz?
So this is by Amos Oz, the late great Israeli novelist, and Fania Oz Salzberger, who's his daughter. And they wrote this together. I don't know what their process for writing this together was. That sounds, writing something jointly with one of my parents sounds challenging. But so this is how they opened a marvelous and relatively short book called Jews and Words. So Jewish continuity has always hinged on uttered and written words, on an expanding maze of interpretations, debates, and disagreements, and on a unique human rapport. In synagogue, at school, and most of all in the home, it has always involved 2 or 3 generations deep in conversation. Ours is not a bloodline, but a text line. There's a tangible sense in which Abraham and Sarah, Rabban Yochanan, Gluckel of Hamlin, and the present authors all belong to the same family tree. Such continuity has recently been disputed. There was no such thing as a, quote, Jewish nation, we are told, before modern ideologues deviously dreamed it up. Well, we disagree. Not because we are nationalists. One purpose of this book is to reclaim our ancestry, but another is to explain what kind of ancestry, in our view, is worth the effort of reclaiming. We are not about stones, clans, or chromosomes. You don't have to be an archaeologist, an anthropologist, or a geneticist to trace and substantiate the Jewish continuum. You don't have to be an observant Jew. You don't have to be a Jew, or for that matter, an anti-Semite. All you have to be is a reader. And usually I stop there, but actually the next, because I'm talking to a poet, I'll just share the next paragraph. They quote in a wonderful poem called The Jews, the late Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai wrote, "The Jews are not a historical people and not even an archaeological people. The Jews are a geological people with rifts and collapses and strata and blazing lava. Their annals must be measured on the scale of a different measurement." So I'm curious, just react to that.
I will react in my own way, if you don't mind. And I think one of the other things is intergenerational trauma of one generation passing on different things to another generation. And I don't know if it's exactly the answer you're looking for, but it occurs to me that after I put this collection together and I started looking at it and some of the things I'd written, I realized that a lot of it had to do with my mother. And my mother's experience was something that I never tried to explore when I was a young girl. My mother was an immigrant. She came here because no one would marry her in her little shtetl where she lived, and no one would marry her because all her siblings were deaf. She was the only hearing child.
Oh.
And what did you do as a woman at that time? But you got married. If you didn't get married, you had no future in that little town. So she came here alone on a ship in 3rd class and found her way by herself. And she was smart. She had graduated from a gymnasium, which was a Polish high school. But because of the superstition of the family, so she came here, and 10 years later, the German troops marched into her town and killed everybody. And she saved herself out of not realizing and not experiencing, knowing what would happen. She did, in fact, save herself. So I kind of felt like I didn't pay much attention to it, and she never spoke about it. My mother never told me. It was little things I found out. She never told my father that her siblings were deaf. She just kept it all to herself. And I think that when I was already grown up and it was too late to ask her, I felt that I wanted to write about it. And so I kind of think that that's very nice to be said, but I think it's more personal than that. I think we have the different
What's more personal? What do you mean? What?
Poetry, that it's from one generation to the next, there's always something. It happens, in my case, to be a Jewish history, and there are ways of expressing it. And I guess I found this way of expressing it. You know, like I wanted to pay homage to her 4 sisters who had died in the Holocaust. They were all deaf. And to her for having come here by herself to save herself from one tragedy, and turned out there was another tragedy that she saved herself from. So I think, poetry expresses things in life that can be Jewish, but are not necessarily Jewish. They're kind of the light and dark of what we experience as human beings.
So do you see your own work as part of a Jewish literary tradition, or do you
Yes.
see it more?
No, I do, not because I set out to do that, but just because that's my experience. My experience is what happened to my parents. My experience is who I am as a cultural Jew. I consider myself very Jewish, even though I don't go to every Shabbos service. And so whoever I am, it's part of you in one way or another.
I'll pivot to ask one other, just a slightly different kind of question,
Okay.
and then we'll open it up for some questions also.
Okay,
So,
and I'd like to read some of that book before questions, because I think there might be a lot of questions in relation to that book too.
sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Go
yeah.
ahead, I want to hear your question.
So you, before we started, you were mentioning a little bit about sort of the experience of publishing as a Jew now and complexities related to that, or, you asked me my sense of it, and I shared my sense of it,
Yeah.
sort of as a fiction writer. As a poet, I know that, I'm curious what your sense of, kind of what it's like to be a Jewish American poet right now, in terms of either in terms of publication or in terms of communities of other poets, or what.
I didn't have any problem with my books. They were all published by separate small publishers who publish poetry. It's difficult to get poetry published because it's not a very popular thing, and people are afraid of it a little bit because they think of the poetry in the past. So I didn't have any trouble with that, but I do know poets, Jewish poets, very fine Jewish poets, that after October 7th and after Israeli response and after the Palestinian protests, the literary community was very much pro-Palestinian, and there were Jewish poets that I know whose readings that they had already scheduled were canceled
Jewish
by
American.
different organizations that didn't want to have a Jewish poet because there was so much pushback. So I think that does happen, and it depends on your audience. Like, I wouldn't go and read my stuff to some pro-Palestinian group. I know that they would push back on it. So I go to my audience. So there is that. So let me, should I do this?
Yeah, please.
All right, so this has Jewish things in it too, but the theme of this book is recoupling. And let's see, how shall I explain this? It's about second chances. I'm a widow. My husband died, and my muse is also a widower. His wife died 3 years ago, and we are a second couple. And so this book is about recoupling at, let's say, an older age. And there's a lot of Jewish stuff in here too. All right, I'll read this one. I just opened it to this page. And so you see how my Jewishness comes out. Not necessarily from the Torah, but from my own experience. This is called prayer. Lucky, you're so sexy, you say. Is it my still shapely legs, the black-seamed hose and garter I wear for show? Should I pray to Adonai, grateful for blessings, declare they are enough? What if my thighs grow flabby and my ass droops? You'll imagine a replacement, a more supple body, a bouncier behind. You were shrewd in business. Know the odds are in your favor, despite your own flabby torso and weak knees. Lifespan favors that injustice. I pray it's my brain you adore, the sensuous synapses and hilly lobes, the sultry nature of my soul. So, would you consider that a Jewish poem? It's called Prayer. You know, but I mentioned Adonai, but it just, the Jewishness comes out in different ways. Here's a poem called A Gift, and it's after a famous poet that you probably know, and it's Elizabeth Barrett Browning. It adores my neck, not quite reaching the hollow between my breasts. It gleams in the sunlight, disappears in the dark. The silver necklace, clasp difficult to undo. I've always been wary of gifts. The sapphire ring for my 7th birthday turned out to be pure glass. The monopoly money, useless for the rent. Am I not worth gold? How does he love me? Let me count the ways. Does he love me with the breath, smiles, and tears of all his life? More likely with the tempered yearnings of later years. No time to ponder who will let go first. Time itself, a gift. Let's toast. Any vodka will do. The liquid as crystalline as the silver in the sunlight. So I do in various poems try to reference Jewishness in a certain way. Here's another one. It's called We'll Skip the Plagues. Okay. On New Year's Eve, he swings to the band, getting down despite the odds. Exercise to bolster balance, cow valve to help the heart pump, titanium metal rod to support spine, a daily pill to prevent sugar overload, a zap of radiation to vanquish malicious cells, hearing aids to amplify what he prefers to hear, a winning smile and a nod to Adonai. Drape the tallis over the shoulders, pin the kippah on the head, recite a blessing for the wine, pour a cup for Elijah, a toast to life. We'll skip the plagues. So, you know, that's a very Jewish poem in my own way. It's not exact. I even have King David in here. Let's see.
It's not a test of how Jewish. It's not a test of how Jewish the poetry is.
No. It's maybe not what you were thinking, but
I didn't have any preconceived. I didn't have any preconceived notions.
You didn't.
No.
Okay. All right. Here's another one. This one doesn't have any. It's called The Unwedding Ring. Silver, not gold, an unwedding ring. How shall we call ourselves? Lovers? Too alarming. 2 peas in a pod. Too vegan. We share meals, not showers. Yes, we share a bed. The tiny dog, yes. The children, another matter. We seem to be a pair, too numerical. A duo, too musical. Sweethearts, too saccharine. Significant others, too many syllables. Beloved, too biblical. Unmarrieds will do. No real estate or conjugal rights implied. So that's the unwedding ring. And I'll read one more. Let's see. I have J. Alfred Prufrock, and how many people know T.S. Eliot and J. Alfred Prufrock? Yes? Okay. This is a it's called Fooling with J. Alfred Prufrock, after J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Now, you know, I remember reading that poem in college, in my first year in college, and reading it over and over again, the rhythm and the rhyming of it. And he, T.S. Eliot, was writing about depression, really, and inability to make decisions and being older. He was writing about his depression about being older. And so what I am doing is fooling with J. Alfred Prufrock. I'm going to write something in answer to him. Okay. Fooling with J. Alfred Prufrock. Shall I wear my jeans rolled? Do I dare to eat a plum? We will go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. A tattoo needled on my upper arm, a butterfly or wilting rose, Medusa on my ankle, a snake slithering up my taunt leg. I'll spray J'adore on my wrists and between my thighs. I refuse to measure my life in coffee spoons. Rendezvous instead with a still handsome man, less a romp on all fours than a wander down rain-drenched streets, past bars serving straight up tequila, doormen who know it all, stray cats howling in the distance. Oh, do not ask, where are we? Do not ask, what is it? No time for indecision. We will go and make our visit, where young men come and go, murmuring about J-Lo. So if you know J. Alfred Prufrock, it's sort of a take on that. And so that's, do we have some more questions or whatever? That's from this book, Recoupling, which is my latest book. I'll take any questions you might have.
This is not a question, but I feel compelled to comment. Especially the poem Two Peas struck me as intensely Jewish. It's so semantic, it's so ironic, and I think of, you know, we Jews have cornered the market on semantics and on irony. So apart from any explicit references to a talis or a kippah, that's the Jewish vibe that I get.
Thank you, I think that's true. And that underneath it, the sense of humor too, you know. There's a lot of poetry that has no sense of humor, that is just very, and I think I got that. And you know, it's also heredity. I was just telling Neil that I think I got that from my father. My father used to read in Yiddish the forward and the morning journal, and he used to read the jokes. So that was the humorous side of my upbringing, and my mother was very dour and complaining, so I had both of those, you know, together. Yeah.
I was wondering how you started getting into writing poetry and
Thank you. A lot of
and
people
got
ask me
into
that question. So
publishing.
I actually, I'm a professor emerita at CUNY. I taught at CUNY for more than 40 years, and I ran a Center for Teaching Excellence in the last 8 years of and I didn't write anything. But I always admired writers. I always kind of wanted to be William Faulkner, if I could. You know, my degree was in English, BA was in English, MED was in English education, and then my PhD was in education. And when I retired, that's when I took to it. And then I was writing a novel. I was writing a novel called The Camel Tamer. And I got kind of stuck in the novel, and I decided I needed to do something that would be easier or, you know, different. And I got into poetry, and then I became successful at it. And I was able to publish about 20 poems in different journals, etc. And it was, I don't know why I got into it. It was like just to have a break from writing the novel, and it's a second career. So there's a lot of second chances in what we do.
In my high school, from 6th, 7th grade on, we had to learn a poem we had 5 terms. Every term you had to stand in front of the class and recite a poem by heart, which was horrific at the beginning, and then I learned to love poetry. And now I'm going through a phase of stay-at-home mom, and then going through a phase of what am I doing with my next chapter of life. So now I'm trying to learn what other people do with, and how they get sort of to where they've been or what their next chapter is. So you inspire me.
And
I love your book, The
Thank you.
Recoupling.
This one?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are scared to talk about. I always joke, when I was 21 and I was at a member of, actually choosing Judaism, and in a Reform synagogue in Maryland, and I went to a program on menopause. And they're like, why are you here? I'm like, well, who else is going to tell me? These Jewish yentas are sitting around chatting about menopause. This is the best place to be. But people don't like talk about things, and I love that this book on poetry, which is so real and beautiful that you were reading to us, is like people act like it's like this taboo subject to talk about love when you're older. I love that.
I have
you're
a
doing
poem in
this.
here, I'm not going to read it, called Making Love After 70. You have to buy the book if you want to read it.
Sounds good.
But I think poetry can be very healing also. I have met a lot of poets who have had some terrible trauma happen to them, whether it's abuse or death or whatever, and when they write about it, it's a healing experience. Suicide, somebody else's suicide, obviously. It becomes a healing experience, so I think that's also what happens with poetry.
So you never got to share your poems with your parents?
No. When I started exploring this whole thing, my parents were both were deceased.
Mhm.
No.
But she
Did the
shares it with
poetry?
her grandchildren.
Oh,
She shares it with her grandchildren.
I have 2 granddaughters, and they love this book. And, it's so funny, but you think like, oh, they'd be embarrassed or like whatever. But they, one granddaughter graduated from Barnard, and she's like 24, and the other one's 22, and she's in her last year at, where is she? Wesleyan. And they come to my readings, and they love that I am doing this. They really support me and appreciate it. And my daughter too. I have 1 daughter and 2 sons. One of the sons is a little less, a little more reluctant about it, but all the women, I don't know what it is, but they're very
The story you
enthusiastic.
told about your mother
Yeah.
was fantastic. I mean, there's something that's there. I'm wondering if you will continue to explore that. I mean, it's got all the elements of huge narrative tragedy there, or a poem tragedy. I mean,
Well,
go back
it's
to-
funny that you should mention it, because I wasn't gonna really talk about it. But I don't know how this ever happened, but I have a project to make a documentary with an ethnographer. I happened to meet somebody who is doing films, and she majored in anthropology, and she wants to do historic films and documentaries, and we just happened to meet, and when she heard this story, she wants to do a documentary about my mother and her experience and our family. And actually, we're going to Buenos Aires in March too. I have one relative left, and he's in Buenos Aires. It's the daughters are in Buenos Aires. He died. He was my mother's cousin, who was 10 years younger than her. She came to this country. He was 10 years younger. There were 13 brothers and sisters in that family, and they lived in that town called Cordes for 400 years. 400 years, that family called the Estermans lived in that town. And he was drafted into the Russian army. He was in the Russian army, and he gave his ration of vodka to his commander, and he took the Jeep. He was allowed to take the Jeep, and he took the Jeep and drove to the town. And he found nobody there, not one Jew there. Everybody had either left or perished. And he went to a Ukrainian nursemaid who the family knew, a neighbor. And he saw the family's silver candlesticks on her shelf.
Mm.
And he didn't say a word. He left. He wrote to my mother. My mother found a relative in Argentina and an address. She wrote to him back to Russia and sent $1 in an envelope with this address. He deserted the Russian army and went to Buenos Aires, and he had a family. He opened up a manufacturing, whatever, and so their family is there. He is no longer, and we're gonna go visit them.
The other dramatic thing that really struck me as well, the other drama, is your mother coming here alone, presumably not knowing anybody. And that resonates with my family, who went through the same,
And
very
she,
similar
actually,
no
the-
relatives here.
nobody, you couldn't get into the United States at that time. She went to Canada, she went to Montreal, and she became a British citizen. She had naturalization papers from, I found them. I found all these documents. So she had naturalization papers from Britain, and then she emigrated down to the United States, and she met my father
But nobody
in Brighton
helped her,
Beach. She met my father in Brighton Beach.
But she did it all by herself. Nobody
Yes,
helped her.
yeah.
And that, to me, is a remarkable story.
And she worked in a garment factory for 10 years. She was a seamstress. She knew how to sew, and so did the deaf brothers and sisters. They learned to sew, and they were very, very good tailors and seamstresses. And people would come from miles around to get their clothing.
Do you
This
know,
was
were
be-
her parents also deaf?
No,
Just the children?
and she was the center. There were two on either side, and she was in the center. So you can imagine, when I had my children, I was concerned that there was some genetic. And
Sure.
when I had my first child, who was a son, I said to the doctor, "Are you sure you can hear?" And he clapped his hands over the infant, and the infant started wailing. And it never, it never went any further, but there must have been some genetic thing.
Or
And
they were also closely related
Yes.
in those.
yes,
older
don't forget, it's this town, where people lived there for 400 years,
Yeah,
so
we're
there
all
must have been
cousins.
intermarriage and, yeah, something. But we never knew what it was, yeah.
If you could ask your mother something, what might you ask her?
Oh,
Good question.
I guess I often wonder, did she feel guilty because she came here and they all died? Did she feel guilty? And I never was able to talk, I never spoke to her about it. And don't forget, I was growing up and I just wanted to be an American. My parents were immigrants, I didn't want to identify. It was only afterward that I realized, gee, all this had happened. Yeah. So we write poetry for all kinds of different reasons, and there are so many different forms and ways that we can write poetry, whether it's in the Psalm of Psalms or today.
Do you have any kind of organized interaction with other poets, support?
Yeah, we started I live in Scarsdale, and in the Scarsdale Library, we started a poetry community, and myself and another person. It's been going on for 6 years, and we meet every week, and different people have joined, and they all bring a poem of theirs that they wrote to read, and we get feedback. So, I've gotten a lot of feedback from different people in the community, in the poetry community.
Did writing your poetry help you finish your novel? Did writing your poetry help you finish your novel?
No, so that's why I was telling other people, so now I have these books, and I'm going back to my novel. And what I've done with I went back to it, and what I did is I divided it into 10 short stories. And I'm hoping that I can publish the 10 short stories, my novel is about innocent young people, diverse innocent young people, a Russian girl, an American boy, and a Palestinian boy, all who have suffered from national conflict in the Middle East. And each story has their voice in it. And I was just compelled to put it together like that, because it's so disturbing to me that we have, I don't want to get political, but that we have this conflict and so many people are suffering. And so that's what it's about, really. Any other last question? Rabbi?
Thank you so much for coming out and
it's 8 o'clock, wow.
for being part of this series.
Thank you for coming. Anybody
and-
who's interested, $15, you can put it in your Hanukkah stocking.
Thank you so
How
much.
do we purchase it? How do we purchase it? Do you
Directly
do you
from
have
you.
I
the-
have some here,
Okay.
and this one, I don't have any more copies, but it's on Amazon. If you're
Okay.
interested in this one, it's on Amazon. And this
Thank you
one
so
is
much.
15.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
much.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
I'll avoid shaking your hand. 'cause I don't
Okay,
get you sick,
okay.
but-
Did you teach at
Oh,
CUNY? Where did you teach at CUNY?
Bronx community, yeah.
I taught at John Jay,
Oh, I know John Jay,
fellow ex
very well.
CUNY.
Cash, do you take Venmo or Zelle or anything like that? Can you
No.
send it?
We have gift cash, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
again.
Okay. I'll have a bookmark too.
Oh, yeah, all right, so we're gonna get you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Of course, that's right,
Is this the exact?
a lucky dollar.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'm gonna bury it and I'll make it grow.
Okay.
Pleasure, thank you for coming. It was
Thank you for
lovely.
coming, that was so it's so beautiful,
Glad you
I
enjoyed it.
really love it.
Yes.
Poetry is wonderful.
And nice to meet you too, Mr. Reed.
This is my new, take about
waiting for the
I'm glad it didn't turn into a snowstorm
Every
tonight.
place all the way on to there is.
Thank you.
Make you feel better.
Yeah. Did you get sick from Thanksgiving?
I'm not a very good
Too much.
This wasn't that, it wasn't the same place you went the year before.
Wait a second, you know, I wanna sign it.
Oh, that would be wonderful, yes, yes.
Let's
see if I have a pen.
Hi, Claudia.
Okay, and that's for David and Liz.
David and,
Do you have a pen?
and Liz?
Yes.
To the boss and her thing.
Okay, all right.
They're,
Multi-volume.
Thank you so much.
really quite short. It's just like, it's not very long.
I never know when to begin that.
Oh, okay.
that's a good comment, that's a good
And who
comment.
is this to?
It's true though, Sam.
Sorry?
I said it's true.
It's, what, it's a true book. This is a true book.
It's a true book.
So it's the anniversary of my mom's passing. My father, loved to write poetry to my mother.
This is something.
Read,
What's this?
This is for one copy,
Poetry for me when I was
please. Here's a pen.
Naomi.
Right out of pocket. Neil's the banker.
The banker, okay.
That's where she gets it.
Thank you.
To Naomi and Marshall. Naomi
Naomi
It's like short
and
stories.
Marshall,
Exactly.
and Marshall.
with two L's.
I really was.
Thank you.
It really grabbed me. Yeah.
That's great stuff.
Good.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be a blizzard or something, but not.
They over
They
talked
overdo it.
Mishka Fairlight,
Nishka fella, okay.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Really, it's
Thank you,
wonderful.
thank you.
I saw.
Enjoy.
I was, my daughter at Smith College, she, when I was reading the magazine that came in the mail, and they mentioned, there was a young Jewish, I guess from, I don't know, North Carolina, I guess. It started an organization called, Sarah or something like that.
Oh, yes, yes, Sarah, yes, yes,
I
I know
just
it.
happened to open up, and
Yes.
then I opened it up, and there you were, in this group. And
Yeah.
I'm like, look at this, and I read through your poems, and then I sent it to a friend. And I'm
Oh,
like, look at
good.
these poems.
I'm glad you saw it, I forgot, yes, yes, Sarah, yeah. I forgot to mention that.
It's like this small world, and she chose to go to Smith, and I was just like, is this a good idea? And I'm getting like more amazed by the moment about these women who've gone through it, the women who graduate, and her education, and then she sent me a picture, she's sledding today, because there's enough snow to grab a tray and go on.
Unfortunately, it didn't happen.
And thank goodness it didn't happen here, so we didn't have a problem